Family can be one of the greatest blessings that we ever have. Family can be a real pain sometimes. And that's just life. That's the life that we live in. And that's not an insult to anyone or their family. It's just the way things are. Joseph understood that. Jesus understood that. And yet one of the primary metaphors that God uses to talk about our relationship with him and our relationship with each other is family. That we're, I almost said one big happy family. We're big, we're seldom one, and we're almost never all happy at the same time. But we are family. I remember one of my favorite shows growing up was the Brady Bunch. And again, I'm old, so I don't know how many people still know about the Brady Bunch, but I always loved the Brady. I can still sing the theme song to the Brady Bunch. I won't sing the theme song to the Brady Bunch, but I could if I wanted to. So just remember that. And the story was two families coming together, and because the father and the mother were alone, and they get married, and they've got this family, and they become this one big happy family, and they have challenges along the way, but they always manage to work things out within the allotted time frame of the show, and it was cool. It's a great picture of what family is. But never that I remember on the Brady Bunch or Little House on the Prairie or the Cosby Show did anyone ever get their brother down on the floor and pin his arms down and choke him while their parents were out of the house, which I did to my brother. It's my older brother, so I'm kind of proud of that in some ways. You don't see that on the TV shows as much. You don't. But family does matter. Family shapes us. Family has far more effect on us than the time we spend in church on Sunday mornings, than the time we spend in school, than the time we spend playing sports. Our family, our parents, and our siblings have a much greater influence on us than anything else in this world. And so it is not a surprise that Joseph was absolutely traumatized when his family beat him and threatened to kill him and sold him into slavery. He'd had that dream. He'd had that dream where all of his family was going to be bowing down to him, and now suddenly he's a slave in a foreign land with no hope of getting back home. And before we get into the story too far, I'm going to actually review the story, not the whole story of Joseph, but this portion that we're talking about. As we've been working through this, Pharaoh has had his dream, and Joseph has interpreted it. 7 years of huge prosperity, followed by 7 years of intense famine, and then Pharaoh puts Joseph in charge of the land of Egypt, makes him second in command, answerable to no one but the Pharaoh himself. And Joseph organizes a system for those years of prosperity in which he levies a 20% tax on everything produced in the nation during that time. And he builds storehouses, he builds entire cities, he accumulates a massive amount of grain so that when the famine comes, Egypt is prepared. And when the famine hits in the first year, all of the people of Egypt come and they pay a lot of money to buy. In fact, if we take the Bible literally, Joseph charged them all of their money. They gave everything they had in the very first year of a 7-year famine to buy grain that year. And the famine extended beyond Egypt into the surrounding region, up into Canaan, where Joseph's family was. And Jacob tells his brothers, hey, I've heard word, there's food down in Egypt. Go down to Egypt, buy grain from the Egyptians, and bring it back here. And he sends all of his sons down to Egypt except one. He keeps Benjamin behind. Benjamin was the only other son born to Rachel, whom Jacob loved dearly, Joseph being the first. And having lost Joseph, Jacob was not about to risk his son Benjamin on a long and dangerous journey to buy grain in Egypt. So the brothers go down to Egypt, and Joseph is in charge of the food distribution. They end up in front of Joseph himself. Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. That's understandable, I think. First of all, 20 years have passed, so he's going to look a lot different than he did when they sold him into slavery. Second, they assume that if he's still alive at all, he's a slave in someone's household someplace, not the second in command in charge of Egypt. And so there they are in front of Joseph, bowing down before him just like Joseph had dreamed. And Joseph recognizes them. And Joseph, understandably, has mixed feelings. There is brothers, there is family, there is blood, there is kin. They are heirs to the promise and covenant of God. And they beat him half to death and sold him into slavery. And then lied to their father about what they'd done. Now, Joseph didn't know what they'd told their father, but he knew they'd beaten him. He knew they threatened to kill him. He knew that they sold him. And he knew that their rejection of him as their brother changed the trajectory of his life forever. He spent time as a slave because of it. He spent time in prison because of it. And now here they were in front of him, kneeling before him, and he had absolute power over them. And he decides to test them. He asks them questions. Or, where are you from? What are you doing? He accuses them of being spies. We're not spies. We're all brothers. Really? Well, who's your father? Our father's there. We've got two other brothers, really. One is still there with our father at home, and the other is no more, is the phrase that they use. And of course, Joseph knows that means him. And so he finally lets them off the hook for being spies, sends them on their way, but he tells his servants, as they're loading the sacks of grain that his brothers have bought from him, to put their bags of money that they used to pay for the grain, put it back in their sacks and sew it up in their sacks. And they're a day's journey out from Egypt when one of them opens one of their sacks of grain to get some feed for their horses, their mules, donkeys, whatever's pulling their carts there, and finds his money bag. And then they all find their money bags and they think, holy, what in the world is going on? How did our money get back here? He's going to think we've stolen from him. This is not good. Oh, and Joseph put one other condition on them. He said, if you ever want to buy grain from me again, you've got to bring your little brother back with you next time to prove to me that you're honest and trustworthy people. I need to see this brother of yours. So if you ever want to buy any more grain, I'm not even going to see you. You won't even get to be in front of me to try to buy grain unless you've got your brother with you. So they go back. They tell their father what happened, all of this strangeness about their money being there. They tell him, he told us we can't come back unless we bring Benjamin with us next time. And Jacob said, that is not happening. That's not happening. I've already lost one son. I am not going to lose my other son. Still must have been hurtful for the brothers that their father's still playing such favorites. He's willing to risk all of them, but not this one final son of Rachel's. Jacob says, can't take Benjamin, so you can't go back. And they stay there, and he's hoping the famine will end, but it doesn't end. And a year later, they're out of food. And they need to go back to Egypt and buy more food. And Jacob says, go back to Egypt and buy more food. And they said, look, Dad, the dude told us we can't even see him unless we have Benjamin with us. And at this point, one of the brothers, Judah, he says, look, I take full responsibility. I will make sure Benjamin gets back safely. Before, another son, I think was Reuben, might have been Simeon. This tough thing. Hear this. He says to his father, I will take Benjamin down. If Benjamin doesn't come back, you can kill all three of my sons. That's a tough deal to make. Jacob rejected it, but now they're out of food again. Judah's assurance does a little bit to calm Jacob's fears, but at last he relents, knowing they have to have food, and he sends Benjamin. And his heart is broken because he's convinced he's going to lose his last son of Rachel. And they go down, they get in front of Joseph again. And Joseph sees Benjamin, he recognizes Benjamin, his brother. He weeps, he cries, he has to leave the room because of it. He comes back, he has more conversation. He says, I see you were trustworthy and honest. He invites them all to dinner at his house, which freaked them all out. I mean, it would freak me out. You go to Washington, D.C., and suddenly the vice president says, oh, come over to my house. I'm like, I'm wearing this. I'm going to eat at your house. And when Joseph has the seating arrangements laid out and his servants seat his brothers, he has his servants seat his brothers in their birth order. This freaks the brothers out. How did he know what order we're supposed to sit in? But he does it perfectly. They have dinner, they share. Joseph says, have a great trip, come back and buy more grain sometime. Except then, he also tells his servants, put their money back in their sacks again. And in Benjamin's sack, I want you to take my favorite goblet and hide it in Benjamin's sack. They get one day out again, and this time Joseph sends his servants after him, saying, Benjamin, one of them stole my cup. Go bring them all back. I'm going to kill them. They go out to get them. And the brothers say, look, no, we're not thieves. We didn't steal anything. Nothing like that. We just came down here to buy grain. And we tell you what, man, if your cup, if that guy's cup is any of our sacks, you can kill that person. And they find it in Benjamin's sack. And they go, going nuts now. This is all crazy. So the brothers say, we're not just surrendering Benjamin, we're all going to go back. And they all go back, and they stand in front of Joseph, and they say, look, this is our youngest brother, our dad's favorite, the apple of his eye. His older brother was lost years ago, and if he doesn't come back alive, it'll break our dad's heart. And Judah says, keep me as a slave instead. First they say, keep us all as slaves. And Joseph says, no, just the guilty party. Just going to keep him. And they said, no, just keep. Judah says, keep me a slave instead. I don't want to have to go back to my father and see his broken heart if his son Benjamin doesn't return. And at this point, Joseph's heart is broken because he can see for himself the reality of the change in his brothers. Part of the story, it's a long story. That's why we couldn't read the whole thing. It's like 4 chapters. Part of the story is all along after Benjamin gets there, Joseph treats Benjamin with favor over the other brothers. They come into his house. They don't have the right clothes to wear, so he gives them all clean clothes. He gives extra clothes to Benjamin. He gives them all food to eat. He gives 5 times as much food to Benjamin. He's showing Benjamin all of this favoritism. Why? To see if they're going to treat Benjamin the way they treated him. Are they going to sell their other younger brother out because he's being treated with favoritism like they sold Joseph out? And they don't. They don't. They are so deeply concerned about Benjamin and about their father that they say, keep us as slaves instead of him. Keep me as a slave instead of him. And Joseph's heart breaks, and he reveals himself to his brother. And he tells them who he is. They don't believe it at first. They had been talking in Hebrew in front of him, and he understood everything they said. They didn't realize he'd understood everything they said, so he knew what they were talking about the whole time. But when he finally talks to them, they don't even realize he's speaking their own language now. They're so dumbfounded. They're so flabbergasted by this whole thing. And in fact, he finally just has to say, I am your brother whom you sold into slavery. Don't feel bad about it. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. God brought me here to save you and our whole family. And that's what's happened. Go get my dad. Bring him back. We'll all live here until the famine ends. It's an incredible story. It's an incredible story. It ends with he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin embraced him, weeping, and he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. And afterward, his brothers talked with him. A tremendous moment of reconciliation. What could have been a time of revenge, a time of seeking justice, a time of punishment, a time of angry retribution became a moment of beautiful reconciliation. And a family that was as broken and dysfunctional as any family you can find anywhere in the world today. And it was beautiful. A couple of questions I think are worth asking. One is, was Joseph right to test his brothers? Was that a right thing for him to do? I'm gonna be a coward on this and say the actual answer to that is above my pay grade. I'm not Joseph's judge. I am not here to condemn or absolve Joseph of anything. So whether it was right for him to test his brothers or not, I think it was at least understandable that he tested his brothers. These men had beaten him, threatened to kill him, and sold him into slavery when he was a kid. Just a kid. And all because their dad treated him better. Because he was dad's favorite, something he had no control over. He was also a tattletale. He did have control over that. But still, death and slavery, not a proportionate response. It's understandable that he tests his brothers. We are called to love. We have the commandments. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and your strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love one another as I have loved you. They didn't have those at that time. There was no command to love. Moses wouldn't be born for hundreds of years. But they understood family. They understood the importance of family loyalty. They understood the importance of blood. They understood the importance of love among family. Joseph understood that absolutely. There was cultural pressure to love your family as great or greater than we know about here today. But his family had betrayed him in the most horrible way possible. His brothers had betrayed him in the most horrible way possible. And Joseph understood the importance of love. He understood that he needed to love his brothers. He also understood that trust and love are not the same thing. We are commanded to give love. Trust has to be earned. And it's acceptable to test trustworthiness, particularly when we've been betrayed by people, particularly when friends or family have hurt and wounded us deeply. It is always okay to test to see whether they are trustworthy. Trust is not the same as love. Love is an obligation. It's a debt that we have. We're to love even our enemies as Jesus loved his enemies. Jesus didn't trust his enemies. Paul didn't trust his enemies. Peter and Mary and the other leaders of the New Testament, they didn't trust but they loved their enemies. Trust is a separate thing, and trust has to be earned. Joseph forgave his brothers. And again, I'm not saying this is the template for how to do it. If someone hurts you, test them, and if they pass the test, then forgive them. That's not the template. We're talking about discrete things here. It is always okay to determine whether a person is trustworthy or not before you put yourself in their care, before you trust your heart or your life or your family or your friends to them. And if they've betrayed you and if they've hurt you, it's okay not to trust. It's okay not to trust. Joseph also forgave his brothers for a wrong. I've had a lot of people do bad stuff to me. Nothing near as bad as Joseph's brothers did to him. I've been hurt before, but yeah, nothing close to that. But Joseph forgave. And he didn't offer forgiveness with naive trust. He offered forgiveness and love with trust that he determined. He tested. He saw that his brother's character had changed. In their character, they had become men of compassion, men who cared more about their family and their younger brother, who was still daddy's favorite, and their dad's feelings, even though dad played favorites. They cared more about that than they cared about their own lives and their own freedom. Now, the miracle here is that God used Joseph's brother's sin to put Joseph and his family in a better position than they would have been had his brothers not sinned. Hear that, because this is a thing that only God can do. And this is the miracle of redemption. This is the power of God at its greatest and most profound that we see in Joseph and we see in a much larger scale in Jesus on the cross and at the day of resurrection. That God used Joseph's brothers' sin, the sinful thing that Joseph's brothers did to him, God used that sin to put Joseph and his whole family in a better position than they would have been had his brothers never sinned. That is not a license to sin. It doesn't mean, ooh, I got to go sin. God will make it even better than if I don't sin. Yes, that's true. Not a good policy for living, though. It'll get you in trouble, I promise. God does not play games, and God is not manipulated. And if we go into something like that thinking, well, if I do this, God has to. God doesn't have to do anything. God is God. Don't play games with God. But God used Joseph, and his family were in a better position than they ever would have been if his brothers hadn't beaten him half to death and sold him into slavery. That's the miracle. That's what our God can do. Take those horrible, even the most horrific things done to any one of us or done to groups of us, and God can take those things and make our lives better afterwards than they would have been if that horrible thing had never happened. It doesn't excuse the horrible thing. It doesn't justify the horrible thing. It doesn't make the horrible thing not a horrible thing. It's still a horrible thing. But God has the power to take even those horrible things and make our lives better on the other side of them. This is the essence of God's redemption. Had we not sinned, Jesus would not have died on the cross. And how would we have known the depths of God's love for us? How would we have... But does that mean that our sin was okay and good just because... No, it doesn't mean that at all. Our sin is awful. Killing Jesus was awful. But somehow God took those things and made our situation even better than it was before. And that is the essence of how God's redemption works. The beauty of that is that no matter what is done to us, past, present, or future, God has the power and will, if we allow him, make our lives better after that sinful thing than it would have been had the sinful thing never been done to us. This is extraordinary. It is. I have a hard time wrapping. Maybe you can wrap your brain around it. I have a hard time wrapping my brain around it. But in all of this, this is how we can, as family, forgive. How we can claim our identity as family. Not just with our biological family, because again, for Joseph, he was dealing with his biological family, with his blood relatives. Jesus made it clear. Everyone who surrenders their life to God, everyone who surrenders their life to Christ they get to be called the children of God. That makes them our family. Makes them our family. And some of them do really rotten stuff. So sometimes our family, they think they're doing the right thing when they're really doing the wrong thing. And they refuse to do a thing that they think is wrong when in fact it's an obligation of love and compassion and mercy that they owe. We get stuff twisted and messed up all the time. And we got family all over the world with all different thoughts and all different backgrounds and coming from all different perspectives, and we hurt each other. Christians have killed more Christians than pagans have killed Christians, historically. Christians have killed more Christians than the Romans ever killed Christians. Than other countries persecuting Christians have ever killed Christians. But we're still family. Jesus said, my prayer is that you become one. As my Father and I are one. So how do we do that? How do we claim our identity? One, forgiveness is essential. It is not an option. Over and over and over again, Jesus emphasized that. Forgive and you will be forgiven. If you do not forgive, you will not be forgiven. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Over and over and over and over again, Jesus says this. Forgiveness is not an option. Forgiveness is essential. Because there's no other way for us to live as family in the kingdom of God forever if we're unwilling to forgive. There will be people in the kingdom of heaven after we die or when Jesus returns. There will be people there that have hurt you, that have hurt people that you love, and that God has forgiven and welcomed into the family. And if you say, if they're there, God, I can't be there, and God says, that's your decision. You can forgive or not forgive. I forgave them like I forgave you. If you're unwilling to forgive them, there's nothing I can do about that. Forgiveness is essential. Forgiveness is an essential part of how we express and live out our faith in God's redemptive power. How can we forgive even the most horrific things? Because God can take our lives and make them better after the sin done to us than they would have been had the sin never been done. It doesn't make the sin less sin. There's a great book on forgiveness written by Bishop Desmond Tutu and his daughter about the process of forgiveness. They set up in South Africa after the end of apartheid, and South Africa is not a perfect country. They have lots of problems there too. But they did an amazing thing when apartheid was first in South Africa. They set up a commission on forgiveness and reconciliation. And Desmond Tutu was a bishop, a Christian man put in charge of that commission. And the stories of forgiveness and the challenges of forgiveness and the pain of forgiveness. And forgiveness is hard and forgiveness is costly. And forgiveness never means pretending that the wrong wasn't wrong or that the wrong didn't happen. It just says, I'm not going to insist that that person be punished for their wrong. I'm not going to seek revenge. I'm not going to demand they be punished. I release them. I release them from that judgment, from that condemnation. The wrong was wrong. The sin was a sin. And how can we do that? Because we have a God who can make our lives even better after the sin than it was if the sin had never happened. Not excusing it, not justifying it, but that's the God that we serve. And that's how we can forgive. Because we know, like Joseph saw, Joseph could see it. It was right there in front of him. If you had not sold me, you meant to hurt me. You hated me. You wanted me out of your life. God wanted me down here so I could save your lives. And my life and yours have been saved. And my dad's and my brother's. Oddly enough, because they sinned. So I forgive you. Because God has made our life better than it would have been otherwise. It's a hard thing to do. Forgiveness is essential. Trustworthiness, though, may be verified. Forgiveness is essential. Trust is not essential. We can verify. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or something else, I feel like you got to love Ronald Reagan when his phrase, trust but verify, back when he was dealing with the Soviets. Trust but verify. I think that's perfectly biblical. You got people in your lives that have hurt you that keep coming back and say, oh, I'll never do it again. Trust but verify. That's okay. You can forgive and still not someone and not trust them. You can love someone and not trust them. Trustworthiness has to be earned and it may be verified. And in the end of the day, we can claim this identity because our God is sovereign. And whatever happens to us, God can redeem. Whatever hurt, whatever harm, whatever damage, God can redeem because God is over it all. God redeemed that harm Joseph's brothers did to him. God could redeem the harm done to you. You might not get to see it as dramatically as Joseph saw it, but God can do it and God will do it. And so we can forgive. We can forgive our blood relatives for the knuckleheaded things they've done. My brother forgave me for choking him. There's other things I've done to my siblings that are now popping into my head going, I wonder if they forgave me for that. That's a conversation for a counselor, not for Sunday morning. God is sovereign. God is sovereign. And so that gives us the space, the emotional, mental, and physical space to forgive our family, whether they're blood relatives or whether they're spiritual brothers and sisters, for the very real wrong things that they have done. Because we serve a God who will take those wrong things and redeem them by His power, because God has control over all of it. And in this life, if someone demonstrates that they're not trustworthy, forgive them, love them, and keep them over there. You know, God will deal with them. God will deal with them. You don't have to let someone keep hurting you. But we do need to forgive. And we do need to love. And we need to live like the people around us really are our family. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.